Hello again. We're going to be going over the Florida Building Code building, pretty much word page by page, just to get a real good idea what's in it. Once again, this is Jack Sheffield, Jack the exam guy. So let's just go ahead and get started. The first thing I would like to let you know is some people put the index at the beginning, and I would actually recommend that. I don't have it in the beginning of my book, but you may want to try that because as you start flipping through this book, you're going to find it's a pain to go all the way to the back of the book every time to look at the index. So I'll leave it up to you, but that's my recommendation. Um, what we're going to do is we're going to get an idea of how this is organized. Now, this is Florida Building Code building. Now, regardless of whether you're taking the general, the building, or the residential, this will be your primary source for information, especially the general and the building. And when I say primary source, I mean for code type questions, questions that are obviously about code and how how code is going to be applied. Sometimes they say according to Florida Building Code. If you're doing residential, maybe more in the residential and less in this book, but we're going to go over all of them, and I think you need to go over all of them, especially chapter 1. I just want to go through the table of contents right now, just so that you have an idea of what to expect. Now, chapter 1, chapter 1 part 2 is really where we start. Administration and enforcement. Part 1 does talk about the scope and what it applies to, and there's a possibility you'll get a question about that, but for the most part you're going to get a lot out of part 2 out of chapter 1, administrative and enforcement. This is where they're going to be talking about permits. This is where they're going to be talking about your inspections and your permit application and so on and so forth, your certificate of occupancies and what have you. This is especially important in the contract administration portion of the exam, but it's also fair game in both. We got some definitions. Now, in our code books, chapter 2 is always our definitions, so keep that in mind. Sometimes the question might just be a definition, or maybe in that question you don't understand something and the definition can help you. Okay, so be aware of, always in these code books, chapter 2 is definitions. We're also going to talk about use and occupancy. Okay, turn on a little bit of light here. Okay. We're going to talk about use and occupancy. All right. So this is important in both exams as well. Each use and each occupancy is going to be assigned a letter. And so sometimes you just need to regurgitate that information. Business is group B, educational is group E, and so on and so forth. Or they might ask you a specific question about a particular use and occupancy classification, and they'll just give you the type, and you'll have to know when you look at a particular table that H is high hazard or I is institutional and so forth. And I'm looking right down here. So it's very important to understand how to find that information. Chapter 4 is special detailed requirements based on use and occupancy, and there are lots of very detailed types of information in Chapter 4, and all of it is fair game, and we're going to talk about that. There's going to be special detailed requirements. A lot of times they talk about the educationals, motion pictures, and that kind of thing. Chapter 5, general buildings, heights, and areas. This is good. This is some good information that we're going to talk about. Chapter 6 is real important. This types of construction. You have a type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5 there. And basically what they're talking about here is combustibility. And we'll go into detail when we get to that chapter. But a lot of times they'll just say a type 1 construction. If you don't know what type 1 don't have a clue what they're talking about, well, you're going to be behind the 8 ball already. Well, you need to understand the types of construction here. Okay, now, and we'll do that. Fire and smoke protection features, good to know. Interior finishes, we might get a couple out of the Chapter 8. Fire protection system, means of egress is a big deal. Getting out of a building is important, all right? And actually, for the fire department to get in a building is important. So watch for that. Sizes, the width of your hallways, the width of your stairs, the stairs themselves and so forth. Big deal. Means of egress. Okay, egress means getting out. How do you get out? Chapter 11, accessibility. There's a whole different book on accessibility, so I wouldn't spend a lot of time in accessibility. We'll talk about that in another video. Interior environment, lighting, okay. Toilet and bathroom requirements, good. Okay, we'll talk about some of that. Energy efficiency, okay. You're going to have an entire manual on energy efficiency, and we'll talk about that when we get to it. Exterior walls, good. Roof assemblies and rooftop structures, we will definitely talk about that. We'll get into some things in Chapter 15. Structural design, yes, important. Special tests and inspections. Soils and foundations, we will talk a little bit about soils and foundations. I'm going to have some stuff for you to highlight in there. Concrete, sure, absolutely. Slab requirements and what have you. So we're getting an overview of what's in here. Maybe something on aluminum, maybe something on masonry construction. There you go. So steel, okay, we're talking mainly about, your metal framing, okay, your kind of light duty metal framing that you'll use in a lot of commercial construction. Chapter 23 is going to be about wood, and we are going to talk about wood. There's going to be some fastening requirements and what have you that you're going to need to know. There's going to be some tables in Chapter 23. And glass and glazing, sure, we'll hit a couple out of glass and glazing. Gypsum board, now you're going to have a separate book for gypsum, but remember that book you can't take in. So it's going to be you're going to want to look here as well for your gypsum board issues, okay, for your sheetrock. Plastic, possibly. Mechanical systems, Chapter 30, elevators and conveyance systems. I want you to be able to find that. There's a question floating out there about elevators and conveyance systems. Special construction, okay, we'll talk a little bit. Encroachments to right-of-way while you're building, safeguards during construction, okay, how you're going to protect the public and what have you. So we've got some good information there, and that takes you through the table of contents. So that gives you an overview of what you're going to encounter. Now we're looking at Chapter 1, Scope and Administration. These are things that you really need to know. Now, if you have, I have a separate video which takes you through what you'll mainly see on the contract administration exam. If you've watched that video and you're really comfortable with it, you may want to skip this Chapter 1 section, actually this Chapter 1 and the types of construction, Chapter 6, Chapter 4. You may want to fast forward through those, but it's not a bad idea to to know what's in there anyway. So this might be redundant if you have seen that video already. So we're looking at Chapter 1, the scope. Business code shall apply to the construction, alteration, relocation, enlargement, replacement, repair, use and occupancy, location, maintenance, removal, and demolition of every building or structure connected to or attached to such buildings. So you're going to, you may get, it's almost like a definition question. Okay, so we're not going to talk a lot about what's on this page, but it does say scope. I know I've got a couple things highlighted, and you can stop if you want to and read those. What it applies to, the intent, the purpose of this code to establish the minimum requirements to provide reasonable level of safety. So they're talking about safety and public health and general welfare. Okay, look at that, means of egress and so forth. So take a minute, you might want to hit the pause button and read that. As we get to the bottom of this first page, and by the way, if you have a 2017 book, this is going to be very similar. So don't fret if you're working out of a 2017 book. The Florida Building Code does not apply to no code enforcement action shall be brought with respect to zoning. So it's not about zoning. It's not about land use. All right. And so forth. Okay. So which do not, pertain to and govern the design, construction, and erection. All right. So one of the first things that they do is they tell you what's exempt. This is really important. 102.2, exempt. Buildings and structures specifically regulated by the federal government. Hey, yeah. Non-residential farm buildings, temporary structures used for construction purposes. All right. Temporary sets, okay, like a commercial motion picture, and a chickie. Well, what's a chickie? It tells you right there. It's a structure built by Miccosukee or Seminole tribe. All right. They also have one. You got some mausoleums, temporary housing provided by the Department of Corrections. So all these things are exempt. A building or structure having less than 1,000. This is K. Square feet in which is constructed and owned by a natural person for hunting, okay, and it has to be existed on January 1st, 2011. So these are kind of things you may be required to know. 102.2.3, the building official shall apply the same standard to a moved residential building or structure that applied to the remodeling of any comparable residential building. Okay, so that's for a moved building in case you get a question about that. Okay, permits. This is important. All right, this is important. They're going to ask you about your permit and your permit application. Okay, and those are two different things, by the way, so be aware of that. You have a permit, and there's certain rules about a permit, and then there's certain rules about your permit application. Okay, so the first thing they do is they tell us that there are some exemptions. All right, under gas appliances and what have you, under the gas code. Okay, minor parts, portable heating, sure. Mechanical is important. There's a question about there that's kind of a negative question, so watch out for that. When I say a negative question, I mean all of the following are exempt from permit except, and so it's kind of a little bit of a mind bender there, but. Number 7 is important. Self-contained refrigeration systems containing 10 pounds or less of refrigerant and actuated by motors of 100 horsepower or left. Okay, exempt from permit. Okay, a portable cooling unit. Number 3, exempt from permit. Okay, so these are things that we see come up from time to time. All right, plumbing. Okay, what happens at plumbing? Okay, if you're going to stop a leak, okay, water, soil, waste, fire, you're just stopping a leak. Don't need a permit, right? Now, what if you need to do an emergency repair? You don't have time to wait around for a permit. Okay, 105.2.1. All right, it talks about you're going to be submitted within the next working business day. You have to do a repair. You can't wait for a permit, but you know it should have a permit. Boom, you do the work. You go the next working day and you say what you've done and apply for that permit. Okay, so we have the application. All right, and it tells us all about the application. The building official, it talks about a reasonable time. Building official shall examine or cause to be examined the application for permits within a reasonable time. Okay, great, sure. They let them define that. But there is a time limit on your application. Okay, an applicant, this is 105.3.2. An application for permit for any proposed work shall be deemed to have been abandoned 180 days after the date of filing. Okay, so 180 days. They might come back to you and ask for additional information. Well, if you don't get back to them 180 days after your application has been submitted, okay, well, it's no longer valid. It does say in 105.3.4, a building permit for a single-family residential dwelling must be issued within 30 days of the application, unless unusual circumstances require a longer time. So that's the building department has to issue the permit within 30 days, or they're going to ask you for more information, or there's unusual circumstances or something like that. Okay, more stuff about the permit. It does tell us 105.11, notice of termite protection. A permanent sign which identifies the treatment and so forth shall be posted near the water heater or electrical panel. That's something that comes up from time to time. Make sure you can find it. Number 105.12, work starting before permit issuance. Upon approval of the building official, guess what? The scope of work in the building permit, application, and plan may be started prior to the final approval and issuance of the permit, provided any work completed is entirely at risk. So you of the permit applicant. So you can start. That is a kind of a tricky thing. You can start before you get your permit if the building official approves. All right. Now we're going to find later what it'll tell us that there's going to be a fine involved, but so it kind of contradicts each other. So you kind of got to understand that. Okay, so I'm going to flip over to 107.3.5, the minimum plan view. Okay, so these are all the things over the next couple of pages that they're going to look for on your permit application. All right, you have all of your site requirements, your setback, separation line, but look at this paragraph right here. This is important because it's really easy to just skip this paragraph and then you're looking in here. It does say you've got to have a floor plan, a site plan, a foundation plan, a roof floor framing plan, truss layout, and exterior elevations. So be aware of that, okay? A lot of times it's real easy to just skip over that and start looking. Setback separation here, that's a good one that you want to know, and then just all these things, electrical, plumbing, all the things that they're going to be looking for on your plans. This is minimum criteria for plan review. All right, temporary structures and uses, section 108. All right, 108.1, the building official is authorized to issue a permit for temporary structures, temporary uses, and such permit shall be limited as the time of service, but shall not be permitted for more than 180 days. The building official, so it's 180 days. Temporary power. All right, the building official is authorized to give permission for temporary power before such installation has been fully completed and the final certificate of application of completion has been issued. So they can issue temporary power. We probably all know that. Now, this is what I was talking about before, 109.4, work commencing before the permit issuance. Any person who commences any work on a building, structure, electrical, gas, mechanical, or plumbing before obtaining the permit shall be subject to a fee established by the building official that shall be in addition to the required permit fee. So it's going to be a fee. They don't even call it a fine. It's a fee. Okay. Well, good. But we know, we already read upon approval of the building official, there's generally not a fee. Okay, so that's all about our permit and our permit application. Now we're going to talk about our inspections. There are some required inspections, obviously, okay, and we are told that in this last sentence on page 15, that the building official shall determine the timing and sequencing of when inspections occur and what elements are inspected at each inspection. So it's the building official. Interestingly enough, it's not it's not according to the state guidelines or anything like that. Well, they use state guidelines, obviously, but it's the building official on test day. So it tells us everything that's in the foundation, then it tells us everything that's in the framing and the sheeting and the roofing and so on and so forth. Now, the one that I have highlighted here, there's a reason for that. Okay, so it's, if you're asked about concealed wiring, what inspection are you going to be done is going to be done after your concealing wiring, you might think it's towards the end of the job, but it's actually at the framing inspection. So look at all the things that are in the framing inspection. That's going to be, but concealing wiring, all concealing wiring, okay, have to be complete. So, and I guess it does make sense because you're getting ready to cover it up, right? At the framing inspection, okay, you're not going to be able to see it again once you put your drywall or whatever your interior finish is. So the final inspection. So this electrical is important. The reason I'm bringing this up is because somebody asked me a question one time that I thought was interesting. So you have an underground inspection on electrical, you have a rough-in, you have a final, and that final has to be made after all electrical fixtures are in place. So if there were and the swimming pools, just kind of disregard that for now. But if there were 4, not including swimming pools, and one of them was electrical fixtures, the electrical fixtures would be number 3, and the final inspection will be number 4. Okay, I hope that made sense to you, because I actually saw these 4 inspections. They listed all 4 inspections, and you had to put them in order. So there was underground, rough-in, electrical fixtures, and then final. Those are the 4 inspections. And then, of course, you have your existing swimming pools to be made after all repairs, alterations are complete, all required electrical, GFCI, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, I want you to understand something called a threshold building. All you're talking about when you're talking about a threshold building is just a fancy way to say a multi-story building. So we go down here and we're told that it talks about a threshold building, a structural and engineer, and so on and so forth. But you have to have a special inspector. And it says the contractor's contractual or statutory obligations are not relieved by any action of a special inspector. So you're building a multi-story. You have to hire a special inspector, but it's really still the contractor's responsibility. That's what they're saying right there. The special inspector shall determine that a professional engineer who specializes in shoring design has inspected the shoring and reshoring for conformance with shoring and reshoring plans submitted to the enforcement agency. So you've got to support these floors as you're going up, and that's called shoring and reshoring. Well, you're going to be taking out some of these shorings, because once the concrete sets and what have you, you're going to be taking out the shoring and moving them up. But it's got to be done according to the plan, okay, that you've submitted, and then this special inspector has to approve that and inspect that. But it's still ultimately the contractor's responsibility. It says here, 110.3, the fee owner of a threshold building shall select and pay all costs of employing a special inspector, but the special inspector shall be responsible to the enforcement agency. So, fee owner of the building, so on. It's the reason I do have that highlighted is somebody did ask me one time about that, and I want you to be able to see fee owner, okay, selects and pays costs. And that takes us all the way through chapter 1. Once again, it is extremely important for the for both exams, extremely important for the contract administration. All right, so we're mainly talking here about general building residential contract candidates here. We got some definitions, so make sure that you can find the definitions. Okay, there's just some good information here in case you might possibly need this. Okay, the one I have always highlighted in the past is public way. Let's see if we can find public way and see if that's highlighted here. Masonry public way. Here you go. I want you to highlight that one. A street, alley, or parcel of land open to the outside area of the street that has been deeded, dedicated, or otherwise permanently appropriated to the public for public use, and which has a clear width and height of not less than 10 feet. So let's go ahead and highlight that. I want you to be able to find that. 10 feet. So it's got to be at least 10 by 10 to be considered a public way. Okay. Let's see if shear wall is in here as well. Yeah, I'd like for you to know shear wall. Okay. A wall designed to resist lateral forces parallel to the plane of a wall. Basically wind. Okay. Okay. If you're anybody that's in building or a framer is going to know that. All right. But it's good to take a look at that anyway. All right. So that takes us through definitions. You may need it. By the way, why don't we look at wood structural panel? A panel manufactured from veneers, wood strands, or wafers, or a combination of veneer and wood strands or wafers, bonded together with waterproof and synthetic resins or other suitable bonding systems.